In part two, Bryan gives us an idea why he had a personal attachment to looking to make medical cannabis available here in the state of New Mexico. Take a look.
So, phase 3 trials that they say we don't have here. Now, haven't there been studies performed in other countries? Israel's a huge...
We don't have those phase 3 trials. And Israel's research has been predominantly funded by the U.S. We fund Israel to do this research, but we won't fund our own researchers here to do it. The only thing that's come close to a phase 3 clinical trial was done by our own Department of Health here. And we had 256 patients who were involved in the Lynn Pearson Therapeutic Research Program.
Okay.
It was taking a look at the use of cannabis compared to THC capsules, dronabinol, for treating nausea and vomiting with cancer chemotherapy patients.
And dronabinol, that is synthetic.
It's a synthetic
version
THC.
of THC.
Yeah, it's what Raphael Mechoulam developed in the mid-1960s, shortly after he isolated THC.
Right.
But this study showed absolutely that cannabis is safe and effective for treating these side effects.
Okay.
However, they were not able to get it published. And the political landscape back in that day was such that peer-reviewed medical journals weren't going to touch something like this.
I hear you.
So it never got published. I actually was able to track down a copy of the report, and I got it put into our medical library here and got it put into the state library up in Santa Fe, so at least it exists out there now. But the DEA refuses to acknowledge that one because it's not widely available.
Right.
Something that is now widely available, not a peer-reviewed study, but last year I had a paper published in the Nurse Practitioner Journal.
Right.
And this paper takes a really close look at what PTSD is.
Okay.
Talks about what happens in the brain and outside of the brain.
Right.
Discusses all the neurobiological processes that are involved in this and how they're regulated through the endocannabinoid system. And then I discuss why cannabis is so much more effective at treating PTSD than pharmaceuticals.
Gotcha. So, you're a vet.
I am.
And did that actually have, or your time in the military, did that have anything to do with you helping to push for, cannabis or cannabis use with PTSD symptoms? And
it was not that.
No?
It was my own personal issues. I had PTSD stemming from childhood abuse.
I see.
And I had gone to UNM. I went there for 2 years, managed to accumulate 23 hours of Fs, and UNM asked me to take a leave of absence. And that's when I joined the Army. It was after I went to work for Sears for a while in their customer service department and realized that's not what I want to do with my life. And I figured the Army was a way to get money to go back to school. So I went in on a short enlistment. It was a great growth experience for me. I didn't have anything significantly traumatic. A few things went on, but I mean, not like going into war or anything like that. But when I got out of the Army, went back to school, and the big part of why I failed out was I was drinking too heavily. And I continued to do that throughout the Army, and continued to do that when I got out. And I almost failed out of school a second time. I was able to kind of talk with a professor who changed a grade, allowed me to stay in school, and I realized at that point, it's like, something's got to change.
Right.
And that's when I had already started to recognize that cannabis had a big therapeutic benefit for me. So I started focusing on, I'm going to make sure I have access to cannabis instead of making sure I have access to alcohol.
Right.
And it turned my life around.
Wonderful.
I suddenly went from failing out of school to being on the dean's list and the honor roll, getting the Dean of Students Award. I mean,
wow.
So it just entirely changed things. Instead of me being focused on everything going on around me because I was so hyper aroused all the time, I was able to kind of turn off my brain and focus on what was in front of me.
Right.
So I was able to study and concentrate and get good grades. It made a huge difference. And I said, this can't be illegal. And that's when I started trying to work on making it legal. And I decided, well, I'm going to start a normal chapter here at UNM. We started a normal chapter, and later we flipped that over to something called the Hemp Coalition. Because Normal is a political organization.
Right.
The Hemp Coalition was educational, and we could get UNM funding for our organization. So we suddenly had like money to go like make flyers and hand things out all over the place. So, but that was kind of where I got this whole start. It's been a long road.
Long road. A very fulfilling road, I'm sure. Seeing things starting to change especially over the last decade or so.
Oh, yeah, and took me 10 years to get the medical cannabis law passed here. From the time I started working on it in 97, it was 2007 when it finally passed.
Yeah.
Now it's been another 10 years and it's still not functioning the way it needs to.
Exactly.